Hi everyone, I'm Celeste. Welcome to my BookTube channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a really fun reading challenge that I participated in this past week. Last week I was watching a video from Heather of Water Bear Reads, and she mentioned a readathon called Summerween. Now, I had never heard of Summerween before and it sounded intriguing, so I did do some research. So for those of you who don't know, Summerween is a week-long readathon, and this year in 2024, the dates that it ran were from Friday, July 5th to today, July 11th, which is when this video is coming out. It's basically a week-long readathon to bring all of the spooky vibes of Halloween to our summer reading. And as soon as I heard of Summerween, I started watching some Summerween announcement videos on BookTube, and I instantly knew I wanted to be a part of this. I was immediately excited. I immediately started thinking of books I could read for it. Now, I am not a big horror fan, but I knew there must be some books out there that I could read and enjoy. After all, horror has many sub-genres within it, and I know I love thrillers and suspense and so forth. So in order to get some ideas for books that I could read, I did watch some book vlogs by other creators here on BookTube. I watched videos by Gabby of Gabby Reads, and she is actually, I believe, one of the original inventors of Summerween, and she is definitely the host, and I think there may be some co-hosts as well. I'll put Gabby's information down below. I also watched some horror for beginners videos by Erin Megan, who I subscribe to, and also Olly from Criminale. And so stick with me, because this vintage classics reader is going to share her week of reading nothing but horror stories. So I chose 5 books for this challenge, and I really just meant to sort of take a look at each and explore what was in them, and if one captured my fancy, then I would keep going with it. The readathon is only a week long, so I really had to cobble together some choices pretty quickly for this challenge. There were some fun prompts for the readathon, but I decided to just make one goal, and that was to read some horror. So the first book I chose was actually one I did not finish. It wasn't horrible, and I did read half of the book, to be fair, but it just didn't end up being what I was in the mood for or what I wanted to spend my time on. So I did move on from it after 100 pages. This is one I had gotten out of the library, and this is called The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. Now, I will read you the premise of this book, and that is Casey Fletcher. She is the main character. She is a recently widowed actress, and she is trying to escape a streak of bad press. She has retreated to the peace and quiet of her family's lake house on a lake in Vermont. Armed with a pair of binoculars and several bottles of liquor, she passes the time watching Tom and Catherine Royce, who live in the cottage across the lake. I say cottage, but it's actually a very expensive house. Catherine is a former model, and Tom is a tech guru. So they have bucks, and they live in this sort of glass and modern architecture monstrosity that some people do build along our lakes now. And I don't know, the writing was okay. I really wanted to love it. I love the idea of haunting at the lake, or of, mysterious, suspenseful things going on at a lake cottage. My family had a lake cottage down on Keuka Lake, and I certainly love the lake lifestyle, and so to imagine something sinister going on within the context or setting of a lake cottage was intriguing to me. I like the fact that this takes place in the autumn after most of the summer people have gone away, and now it's just people coming to spend the weekends there, so it's sort of lonely and quiet and secluded during the week. The problem was that I didn't really care for the main character, Casey Fletcher. Now, Casey's husband supposedly drowned in this lake a year prior. It is fun, it is creepy, there are some great descriptions of the lake, but I have to be honest, I didn't care a bit about Casey. I didn't like her. We feel nothing for her. It's like the author kind of phoned in her character. Now, I know she is kind of gutted and feeling hollow from her husband's death, but I feel like he could have given her a slightly richer inner life. I don't think she was fully realized. I don't need the book to be strong literary fiction. I can enjoy a very plot-driven pulp kind of a novel, but I just felt like the author kind of phoned in her character and wrote her at an emotional distance. And as I got to page like 75, page 80, page 100, I continued to just not care about her or what was going on. And so, yeah, it just wasn't interesting to me. The writing wasn't interesting. So I decided rather than squander my whole Summerween week trying to get through Riley Sager's book, I thought I would move on and try something else. I will definitely try some more Riley Sager in the future. I don't want to judge his entire oeuvre by one book, but yeah, it just wasn't for me at this particular time for this particular readathon. So what I did next was I thought, well, I'm not having much luck with novels. I'm going to try to at least get myself going, dip my toes in the cold water with some haunted house stories. And to that end, I decided to try a few short stories from the Mammoth book of haunted house stories. This is a great old collection that I got used, and it does have older classics in it. These are not modern writers by any stretch of the imagination, but they all are classic haunted house tales, and there are a lot of interesting authors represented here. So we have Sheridan Le Fanu, Algernon Blackwood, Charlotte Riddle, let's see, L.P. Hartley, Faye Weldon, Penelope Lively, M.R. James, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Joan Aiken, etc., etc. So I read 2 short stories from this collection for this challenge. I read an older one and then I read a newer one. So the old story that I read was called The Southwest Chamber by Mary Eleanor Freeman. Now, Mary Eleanor Freeman lived from 1852 to 1930. Born in Randolph, Massachusetts, she worked as a secretary to author and physician Oliver Wendell Holmes, and in her side hours, she started writing poetry and novels with a strong New England regional flavor, and she combines the everyday domestic with the supernatural. I thought that the story I read by her, The Southwest Chamber, was pretty good. So I do want to show you that for each of the stories, it is kind of cute. They give you a little prospectus introduction, and it's almost like it is a real estate agent that's showing you the haunted house. And so the way they set it up is address, property, viewing date, and then the agent is the author. So I thought that was very cute and original, a very cute way to do that. So yeah, so this story is just like a classic haunted house story, and it's about Ackley Mansion near Acton, New England in the USA. And it is some women that have rooms for rent in their mansion in New England, and one of the rooms is haunted and somebody died there recently. So they have different people come to stay there, like a school teacher and a sort of spinster librarian. And whenever anyone stays in the room, she's describing what happens and how things move around. And one moment there's clothes hanging up in the closet, and the next they're gone, and the quilt on the bed keeps changing to a different design. And when you look in the mirror and you're wearing a brooch, the brooch you thought you had on, now it's some strange woman's brooch around your neck. So it is definitely creepy, and it is good at giving you those sort of spooky classic Halloween vibes from an old 1800s Gothic ghost story. It worked for me in that sense. I did find the ending a little bit abrupt and unsatisfying, and I also do have some difficulty with that really old classic lit device of thinking that if you italicize a sentence and put an exclamation mark at the end of it, that somehow makes your story spooky. You know, so it would be like in italicized letters, she felt chills go up her spine, exclamation point. That didn't really do it for me as a reader to make me scared, you know, just accentuating the text that way. But the way she described the haunting of the room was pretty neat, and so I thought it was a nice little classic old-fashioned introduction to the genre. The other story that I read in here was actually one by Stephen King, and that was a story called The Bogeyman, which is apparently a really classic old Stephen King story from March 1973. And this one didn't really work for me either. Now, I've never read any of Stephen King's novels. Will I read more Stephen King? Absolutely. I've gotten lots of great suggestions on where to start with Stephen King. The story was okay. It was kind of like, you know, kind of a campy episode of Tales from the Crypt where, you know, the ending was supposed to be kind of a shocker, but it's rather mild. And I suppose it would be scary to kids. But it didn't tell me enough, and it didn't do enough. I wanted more to happen. Also, just as in the case with the Riley Sager novel, I did not care about the main character. I didn't like him at all. And I know Stephen King was penning him to be kind of a jerk, the way he was portraying him. Very macho, very controlling. And I think the goal of that was so that you would suspect him. But when the things happen that happen, I didn't care because I didn't like him. So I had no sympathy for him regardless of the horrific circumstance he was in, if that makes sense. So I will definitely try a Stephen King novel, but this particular short story, The Bogeyman, didn't do it for me. So next up, I did take a suggestion from Olly of Criminolly, and Olly has some really great suggestions, some enticing book suggestions for horror for beginners, like what are some good starting places, and he does recommend some novellas and short novels that might be interesting to you. I'll put his information down below. But one of the classic horror reads that he did recommend was Psycho by Robert Bloch. This is the 65th anniversary edition. And so I enjoyed this. I liked Robert Bloch's writing. And we know that it's the story of Mary Crane coming to the Bates Motel, and Norman Bates is the proprietor and lives with his mother. So the writing was really very good, and Robert Bloch is very smooth, very professional. He writes with ease. His style is very cinematic, and he slips very easily from horror tropes into detective tropes. The novel kind of goes back and forth between the two, so it is a suspense novel as well, a thriller. I was reminded in several spots of Shirley Jackson in terms of the way he writes this. The writing was more rich in literary terms. He describes sunlight and shadows resting on the neck of somebody's sister and the edge of a sword of a statue right at where her neck level is. And I thought that was very clever the way he wrote it. So his images and descriptions are rich, his characters are well drawn, and it was really, really good. I could envision the entire thing as a movie, of course, and it's pretty close to the movie, I would say, except for a few small changes that were made. But this only took me like a day and a half to read. It's only 175 pages. It's a quick read, and if you are a fan of Shirley Jackson's, you may enjoy this. So then I decided to try reading another book within the week because I had finished the short stories and the sort of novella by Robert Bloch so quickly. And so I took the plunge and decided to try The Haunting of Lee Harker by Darcy Coates. Darcy Coates is another author similar to Riley Sager that I'm constantly seeing discussed on BookTube, on people's channels where they're discussing horror novels. And so I decided to try to give this a try. Darcy Coates is an author who lives in Australia. It's a female, and she has many books available. Her story as an author is kind of interesting because she originally self-published many ebooks on Amazon, and they weren't selling many copies. She suddenly got discovered with one of those after years and years of writing and self-publishing, and she has just taken off tremendously in the past like 9 years. And so I decided to try The Haunting of Lee Harker because it met most of the challenges that were put forth by Gabby from Gabby Reads. So read a book with the night sky on the cover, and read a book set in summer. Well, this one wasn't set in summer, but it does have a sky on the cover. It did say read a book in the dark or at night and read a thriller horror. I did both of those. Boy, talk about reading this in the dark. I read this. We actually this past week had a tornado watch, which quickly turned into a tornado warning, and the sky got super, super dark, and the rain was just pelting down, and there were floods and downed trees. And at one point we did get a tornado warning telling us to go down to our basement, and so we were ready to go down onto the basement steps. We had bottles of water, we had a flashlight, we had chairs set up at the bottom of the basement stairs. So I actually literally did bring this down to the basement with my back to the cinder block basement wall with my flashlight. So I think I should win for Summerween for doing all of that during a almost tornado. It ended up not touching down here, but it did touch down in a place called Eden, New York, believe it or not. Anyway, back to the book. This book was recommended by Erin, Megan, and by Gabby of Gabby Reads. This is the story of Lee Harker, and she lives in a quiet suburban home, and there is a presence in this home. Now, she has been there for, I think, 15 years. I can't remember. I think it's 15 years. Living her life. She's a loner. She goes to her job every day. She's very much a creature of routine. She gets up, she makes her breakfast, she gets her clothes on, and she goes off to work. She's a loner at work, but she likes everybody. She comes home from work at night, and she has her TV dinner, and she does paperwork and makes herself a cup of tea, and doesn't really interact with her neighbors very often, and suddenly there is a presence of some kind in her home, and she doesn't know what it is. And this is such a roller coaster ride of a book. From the first sentence, you are just going with her, and things are happening at a very rapid rate. Like, Darcy Coates does not waste any time in this book setting up a slow burn of a scene. Like, you are right in it right away. And it was actually very good fun. I'm not done with it yet. I'm a little bit more than halfway through, so I can't critique it in full. I do care about Lee Harker. Her character is richly drawn. You do get into her internal psychological landscape. You do get to know her house, and it's described very well. The plot twist that this takes is interesting and makes you want to go on. So I decided to keep the book and keep going. And yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm not done with it, but I think I have read enough to know that if this is an indication of her writing, I will definitely read more. Will I run out and buy another one right away? No. But I could definitely see myself reading a Darcy Coates book like once a year. So yeah, this is good. It's fun. This would be a great one to take to a lake house, for example. And the cover is quite spooky if you look at that. Yeah. So, and it's not, the other thing I wanted to say is it's not really any sort of slasher thing. It's not gross body gore or anything like that. It's more an old-fashioned sense of creepy suspense. And the author really communicates kind of like caring about her character, like having a kind of a love for her character who's gotten themselves in a bad situation, but the author is like sticking with her in such an interesting way that she makes us care too and want to stick with it and see what ends up happening. So this is a real roller coaster ride, and if you enjoy presences in house or haunted houses, and it's a very rapid sort of blow by blow of what's going on, you might enjoy this one. So yeah, The Haunting of Lee Harker, that is what I am reading now, and I'm looking forward to finishing it and seeing what happens next. And then finally, I know that I won't be able to get to this within the week that Summerween is, but I do have a goal of reading another novel by Laura Purcell. And I don't know, I think Laura Purcell is considered horror, but it's also many times gothic suspense. And I did read Bone China at the beginning of this past year in January, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's got a few elements of folk horror in it, and so I really like that. I have heard that The Silent Companions goes a little bit further, so I don't know if I will like it as much. I'm okay with like a Jane Eyre kind of a story, of the trope of a woman coming to a house full of secrets and mystery. And I don't mind if there's a ghost or some little people or some kind of a presence there, but I don't want it to turn into Friday the 13th or, you know, Freddy Krueger or someone with a hockey mask and a chainsaw. That is not my jam. But this has a very promising beginning, so I did want to try another by Laura Purcell. And look at this gorgeous, gorgeous cover and the little keyhole cut out in there, and when you open it up, this is the end page, which I think is beautiful. So I think I will be reading The Silent Companions after I finish The Haunting of Lee Harker. I will either be reading this one, or I did get another Laura Purcell book because I found it online super cheap, and I am collecting her hardcovers, and that is called The Corset. So that is also by Laura Purcell. I don't know much about either of these, but I did want to try another Laura Purcell, so I thought I would give that a try. You know, the thing that I found really rewarding this week was that I have discovered some new authors. I have discovered some horror writing that I like. I didn't realize that horror had so many sub-genres. I always sort of snobbily looked down on horror as being all slashers, and it's not at all. I definitely have very quickly discovered what I will and will not read. What I definitely will read is A Town Full of Secrets, A House Full of Secrets, gothic crossovers into thriller and suspense. I don't mind elements of horror wound through a thriller story. I have heard there is a retelling of A Midsummer Night's Dream from the human's perspective. That sounds fascinating to me. I enjoy black horror that turns worn horror tropes on their heads. For example, Tyler Perry in the movie Get Out. And I've also heard about a book by a author called LaTonya McQueen, who writes about ghosts at a white wedding that takes place on a plantation. I think that's fascinating. By the way, did you know that Rod Serling started The Twilight Zone because of the death of Emmett Till? I didn't until just the other day. I read it in a Smithsonian article. If I can find it, I'll post that below as well. I also like indigenous horror and climate horror, and of course the reworkings or reframing of classic monsters in retellings such as the Netflix series Penny Dreadful. And I like domestic stories with a hint of the macabre, of the sort that Shirley Jackson wrote. So much to my delight, at the end of Summerween, I have some new books to read. I have some new authors to try. I enjoyed myself. I came up with a better appreciation of the many subgenres of horror, and I'm definitely going to be including more of those into my TBRs in the future. And having done so, I feel sort of refreshed and ready to go back to my beloved classics and vintage books. Sometimes you just have to take a little bit of a turn in your reading and just read by mood. That's my belief. And this was just what the doctor ordered. So I enjoyed Summerween. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.